A Texas man is suing a former Guadalupe County Sheriff's deputy, accusing him of using excessive force during a police stop in 2021. On this week's Inside the Investigation, senior investigative producer David Barrere answers questions about the body camera video at the center of a federal lawsuit.
Hey, show me your hands.
On the side of Highway 46,
Put your hands up.
in Guadalupe County,
Put your hands up.
sheriff deputies zero in on 40-year-old Ronald Smith.
Show me your hands.
Body camera video shows Smith sitting outside the Guadalupe Valley Memorial Park Cemetery when deputies approach with guns drawn.
Go less lethal. Go lethal.
As they surround him, Smith is on the phone with 911 dispatchers.
Lay on your stomach.
Get on your stomach.
After less than a minute of verbal commands, Deputy Hunter Saines shoots Smith with a chemical irritant.
I got people shooting at me, sir.
Lay down. Lay down. Lay down.
According to an offense report by Deputy Saines, he was initially checking on Smith, who he passed earlier walking along the highway. Deputy Saines wrote he began following Smith on foot when he saw him jump a barbed wire fence and start running in a nearby field.
He told me that it was sheer terror.
Attorney Andy Cano is now representing Smith in a federal lawsuit against the officers, alleging excessive force. Cano says the interaction, documented in court filings between Smith and Deputy Saines, actually begins when the deputy nearly hit Smith with his cruiser.
He was nearly hit by this cruiser, and then Smith gave him a hand gesture. And then at that point, Smith noticed periodically as he was walking down the road, a cruiser. The cruiser kept coming back and forth.
Does that male have an open 911 line?
I need help. I need ambulance. 911.
Yeah, well, he was on the phone with somebody,
The federal lawsuit alleges Saines and another deputy used excessive force and then worked to assert a bogus criminal charge against Smith. The Guadalupe County Sheriff's Office told KXAN, due to pending litigation, it was unable to comment on this matter at this time.
So what y'all gonna do? Y'all take me to jail?
Attorneys for the deputies seen on video did not respond to KXAN, but said in court records the deputies did not know that Smith was unarmed, and they acted reasonably based on the information they had at the time of the encounter.
Lay on the ground.
Body camera video shows Smith sitting with his legs crossed, with one hand holding his phone up on the speaker and his other hand held up, showing he was not armed and was not at that point trying to evade.
My thoughts are mixed, actually.
UT law professor Jennifer Lauren has mixed thoughts on what the video shows.
On the one hand, it appeared that the officers had an inclination to reach for some less extreme tools in their training toolbox.
I got people shooting at me.
On the other hand, it's significant in terms of sort of being contrary to principles of de-escalation that the first point of contact between the police and Mr. Smith, once Mr. Smith was stationary, right, was sort of peak force threatened. Right.
What was your reason to stop me?
The footage shows officers first considered arresting Smith for trespassing,
And then you ran through some random person's property.
but after asking neighbors, found no one wanted to press trespassing charges.
You're not being placed under arrest.
The deputies contemplated an emergency detention,
However, you're being placed under emergency detention. You're going to be medically evaluated. That's it, to make sure you're okay.
but in the end, the deputies opted to arrest Smith for evading arrest,
Sir, you're under arrest. Let's walk this way.
a charge that was later dismissed.
I won't let you fall, bud. I won't let you fall.
They're Monday morning quarterbacking. Why do we have this guy? What can we charge him with? If you're concerned about someone, it doesn't start with a criminal investigation. It doesn't segue into a criminal investigation.
You're watching Inside the Investigation, and I'm joined today by senior investigative producer David Barrere. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we just watched this story on this arrest that happened back in 2021 in Guadalupe County. But before we get into the details of the video, I want to talk about where this case stands now. What can you share with us?
So this lawsuit was filed in federal court. And let me make sure I can remember this correctly. Originally, it was filed on against the officers in Guadalupe County Sheriff's Department on 3 grounds. Excessive force was one, malicious prosecution was another, and false arrest. So on a motion for summary judgment that was brought by the defendants, the trial judge threw out 2 of those, and the remaining one was excessive force. And so that is being appealed right now. That decision to, I guess, not throw out excessive force as well is being appealed in the Fifth Circuit. So the trial judge essentially said you can go to trial on this excessive force claim, and the case remains pending until the Fifth Circuit makes a decision on that.
So for those of you who are listening, there is one point where one of the deputies hangs up the phone. You see that on the video. I want to talk about what's happening there. What was your takeaway from seeing that in the body camera video?
Yeah, you see that for a split second. So what leads up to that is what you see in the video is that the man there, Mr. Smith, is sitting on the ground. His legs are crossed. He's got one hand kind of up, the other hand's kind of holding a phone, and he's having a conversation. So at that point, you don't realize who he's talking to or what's going on. Then there's the pepper spray, the arrest, sort of a little bit of a scuffle as they get him down on the ground. And one of the officers picks up the phone, turns it, and you see for a split second that it says an emergency call, and he turns it off and kind of tosses it on the ground. And so looking at that, we have confirmed he was on the line with 911 at that time. His attorney confirmed that, and we have made a request to the Guadalupe County Sheriff's Office for the audio of that call, and that remains pending. But he was talking to emergency services at the same time we learned that he was having this encounter with the police.
It definitely adds layers to what you're watching when you know that he was making that phone call. We talked to UT law professor Jennifer Lauren, and she, for context, watched the body camera video and read over court filings in this federal case. In the story that we just played for you all, she mentioned her concerns about the initial contact between Smith and the deputies. And David, you did that interview with her. What were her other takeaways that stood out to you?
A big one, like you said, was initially that the officers came in sort of at the top level of threat response. There were weapons drawn, and then there was they call it less than lethal. The pepper spray was done, and he was sort of put down and handcuffed. So there was not like a gradual escalation of things. And as you can see, there didn't appear to be much de-escalation either. The other thing that she sort of questioned and scrutinized a little bit was when the whole thing ends and they have him in handcuffs, they're sort of seeming to struggle to figure out what exactly they're to charge him with, what illegal act had been done. There was trespassing was floated, but that I guess would require the landowners to want to press trespassing charges, and nobody wanted to do that. There was the option was floated to take him to the hospital for like a mental health sort of assessment, which would not have been an arrest. And then they ultimately landed on evading arrest.
Yeah, I remember watching the interview back, and she brought up, it seemed throughout the interaction they were unsure if a crime had actually been committed. At least that's how it appeared in the video.
Yeah, and that's something that that Mr. Smith's attorney brought up too. He described it as sort of like Monday morning quarterbacking or trying to reverse engineer what had happened to, in his words, like justify the use of force. And he said, if you're just trying to help someone, it's doesn't, you don't go in like that. So that was a concern.
It is interesting that in the video, we kind of point out it started as trespassing, it went to maybe an emergency detention, and then they landed on evading arrest. And there was a particular moment in this body camera video where a loved one actually brought this up. Can you kind of explain that moment in the body camera video?
Yeah, that sort of stood out to us, and we were, as we were watching it, a woman shows up on the scene. She says that she's the man, Mr. Smith's wife, and she's sort of trying to reason with the police and try to like end the situation essentially, and so that Mr. Smith can, get out of there without going to jail or anything. And when they tell her that they're landing, that they're going to arrest him for evading arrest, she says, "How can you arrest someone for evading arrest if they didn't know they were under arrest?" And that seems like a pretty sharp question under the circumstances, because it didn't seem that Mr. Smith knew that he was under arrest at the time that, went leading up to this moment. So I asked that to the law professor as well. I said, is that a valid question? She said, yeah, that's a pretty good question to ask. It makes sense to ask that sort of question.
Right. The deputies involved in the sheriff's office, they've not responded to our questions. The sheriff's office in particular, I should say, said that because this was pending litigation, that was why they were not going to comment. But they have filed responses in court. Can you walk us through what they've said up to this point?
It's been, I can boil it down to a pretty simple thing. They've denied the allegations in the lawsuit. They claim that what they did was not, breaking any constitutional rules, and that the lawsuit should be dismissed. So they've stood on that. Because there's pending litigation, often people who are defendants in lawsuits like they are don't want to talk with us, because anything that they say could be brought into the court proceedings, and they just wanted, I guess, to keep it in court and not do any interviews.
Well, this is still playing out in federal court, and so I know there will be updates that we'll share with you all. David, thank you so much for joining us and for giving us additional context on this story. There's a lot of body camera that you sat and watched repeatedly, trying to make sure that we fully understood this. So I'm glad we could get your context on what you've been reporting so far. We appreciate those of you who are listening or watching. Don't forget to join us next Friday at 10:30 for another episode of Inside the Investigation. And you could also listen to KXAN's investigative podcast. It highlights some of our award-winning team's latest reports exposing corruption, safety concerns, system failures across Texas. The podcast also features audio versions of our weekly Inside the Investigation discussion with the journalists like David who are working on these stories. It's available wherever you get podcasts. See you next time.
Thank you.